right, take a look at this. Oh, it's a new baby. Prince William, this is the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge welcoming their third child. He is a boy. He was born at 11:01 local time, 8 pounds, 7 ounces. They haven't announced the name yet. Oh, how sweet. Always fun to see.
Look at the baby.
So beautiful. Third child for the couple. Kensington Palace tweeting Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Cambridge was safely delivered of a son.
Yes.
Yes. At 11:01 hours. 8 pounds, 7 ounces. Woo! That's a big baby.
She's walking like a woman with a third child, too. She's like, yep, I've been here before. I'm going to go bowling. It's all good.
All right, Larry. Thank you so much, Larry Elders, for being here. Here's
Thank you for having me.
Fox News Alert, we are awaiting the White House now and the briefing amid a new report about the president's ultimatum for North Korea. Let's go outnumbered overtime. I'm Harris Faulkner. That briefing is expected to start at any moment, and when it does, we will immediately take you there. The Wall Street Journal is reporting President Trump will ask North Korea to dismantle its nuclear arsenal before talking sanctions relief at all. This is the president is pushing back against critics who say he's already conceded too much to the North's dictator, tweeting, wow, we haven't given up anything, and they have agreed to denuclearization. So great for the world. Site closure and no more testing. We are a long way from conclusion on North Korea. Maybe things will work out, and maybe they won't. Only time will tell. But the work I'm doing now should have been done a long time ago. Exclamation point, end of sentence. But Fox News senior strategic analyst General Jack Keane has his doubts about the North's intentions. Watch that.
We don't know how serious this guy is because he's never been truthful with us. That's the problem we have. We're about to find out, and I think we should take some comfort in the fact that the administration is going into this clearly understanding who they're dealing with.
National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin joins us now from the Pentagon. Boy, this news is moving quickly today, Jennifer.
That's right, Harris. Well, the Pentagon continues to prepare military options in case the summit talks between President Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un break down. And just this morning, Pentagon spokesman Colonel Rob Manning said the Pentagon has not relaxed its military posture. Today, South Korea took measures to set the stage for a summit meeting between Kim and the South Korean president this Friday by turning off the loudspeaker broadcasts of propaganda into North Korea, which have been blaring Korean pop music and messages since North Korea's fourth nuclear test in early 2016. Friday's summit between the two Korean leaders will be their third. This time, Kim Jong-un will cross the border into South Korea, the first time a North Korean leader has done so since the Korean War armistice in 1953. The two countries technically remain at war. It's not clear whether the North Koreans have reciprocated the broadcast of cross-border propaganda. On Saturday, North Korea announced it would close its nuclear testing facility and halt future nuclear and ballistic missile tests. It has not said it would give up its nuclear weapons.
But that's certainly the focus of this conversation has to be denuclearization. That's the ultimate goal. We've been very clear about that from the beginning. This president, as well as every member of the administration, has made clear that that is the goal of any conversation is denuclearization. And until then, we're going to continue the maximum pressure campaign on North Korea.
A senior administration official explained to the Wall Street Journal, quote, when the president says that he will not make the mistakes of the past, that means the U.S. will not be making substantial concessions, such as lifting sanctions, until North Korea has substantially dismantled its nuclear programs. The U.S. will expect the release of the 3 Americans currently jailed by North Korea as part of any deal, but that definitely will not be enough, nor will any sanctions relief be likely in exchange for a mere freeze of North Korea's nuclear program. In his public remarks Saturday, Kim Jong-un never said that he planned to give up his nuclear weapons. Harris?
Jennifer, thank you very much. My first guest says he believes the president's dealings with North Korea are off to a pretty good start. Christian Whiten is a former senior advisor in the Trump and George W. Bush administrations both. He also worked with former Ambassador John Bolton on North Korea when he was at the United Nations. Perfect guest to have today. And welcome to Outnumbered Overtime in person. Great to see you on the mezzanine. You know, Christian, as we look at this, when you say things are off to a pretty good start, what are your measurements? Like, what are you looking at and saying, yeah, this is working, this is working?
Well, first of all, the goals are actually realistic, that North Korea is behaving very differently than they did in previous major rounds of arms control talks in the Clinton administration and the Bush administration, where, frankly, we gave them a lot of goodies just to come to the negotiating table, and they made fairly outlandish promises, like completely denuclearizing. So this is a little more measured.
All right. So you think the goals are within line of something that we can accomplish, but what about what we've heard that the president's going to ask for next?
I think that's very important, and it's a good step, and it's a good goal to have. It's essentially dismantling their nuclear program, which doesn't necessarily mean removing every little piece of nuclear material from the peninsula.
So, Christian, how do we make sure that they're doing that? Like, what is part of the deal that will, because we've seen how inspectors can and can't work in other parts of the world. For example, Syria and those chemical weapons that we thought were cleared.
That's right. And luckily, John Bolton is the national security advisor, because before he was the U.S. ambassador to the UN, was the undersecretary at the State Department responsible for arms control and verification. So having in place the mechanism of inspecting. Also, the thing is, again, structuring this the right way so it's substantially dismantling the nuclear program, which is easier if you're just looking for warheads or looking for ICBMs or looking for assembly facilities. That's a little different than some of the more intrusive inspection regimes that are necessary under different arrangements.
So you mentioned again, Ambassador Bolton. I want to remind everybody, off to the left of your screen is the White House press briefing. Press Secretary Sarah Sanders expected in the next little while, few minutes, to step up to the lectern. When she does, to give the daily briefing, we will go there live. You say talking with Ambassador Bolton, or having worked with him on North Korea, how much are what the president wants and his lists a lot like Ambassador Bolton, and why does that matter?
Very similar. And when I worked with Ambassador Bolton, I was working on North Korean human rights. We were trying to make life more difficult for the Kim regime. Others in the Bush administration were frankly trying to appease him for this foolish deal where, North Korea offered its nuclear arsenal, took the goodies, and never delivered. John was always very skeptical of that, and has an approach of pressure and willingness to walk away from a bad deal. Any American who's bought a used car knows that you have to do that to get a good deal. Donald Trump knows that. A lot of the foreign policy establishment doesn't.
He's already said, I mean, he's not going to sit down and stay at the table if it's not a good deal. So what is a good deal? Because when you say, oh, no, the goals look like they're in line with things that can get done. I mean, just a year ago, we were watching North Korea just do whatever it wanted with ballistic testing, with missile testing. And now they're saying we're going to stop all that and we're going to wait for these. How did we get there?
We got there through a year and a half of really strong pressure led by the Trump administration. I was at the State Department and saw some of this come together myself. A different approach, whereas Obama had this policy of strategic patience, which meant doing nothing while North Korea got stronger. The administration, strong economic, military, diplomatic pressure, some of which we've seen, some of which was behind closed doors, and it brought North Korea to this point.
All right. So what do you think the summit would look like? I mean, we don't know yet where it's going to be. There's some cities that have been thrown out, cities and countries that have been thrown out. But the meat of that conversation, it's a one meeting. It's not the only meeting.
Right. And I think that we should be prepared for on-again, off-again talks. You remember Reagan got a big breakthrough on arms control with the Soviets because he was willing to walk away from Reykjavik, from a bad deal. And that led actually to the the Intermediate Nuclear Freeze Forces Agreement, which eliminated an entire class of nuclear weapons. So being willing to have this go to multiple phases. So I think we'll have a summit. Hopefully it sets up a framework. But, it's sort of a high-stakes thing because it could go sideways.
Because we are so close, and this president has said it could go forward. He didn't describe it as sideways, but I know what you mean, or it could not happen at all. Are we in a position now to say that this is part of a legacy of this president now? I mean, this is a big deal, even if it doesn't maybe yield anything in that first meeting.
It is, and his willingness to engage in personal diplomacy is a hallmark of Donald Trump. It's different from the past where you sort of had bureaucrats assembling these deals, some of which were lousy trade deals, arms control deals, and the president showed up to coronate an agreement. Instead, Donald Trump is not deferring to the bureaucracy. He's doing it himself, which is good.
Christian, before I let you go, transactional is a word that comes into my mind, which is so much a part of how this president does things differently. Your last thought?
I think this is a big deal. It's getting into deal making, but it's part of a bigger strategy also in the region, which really is turning attention and putting focus on China, because that's, of course, the 800-pound gorilla in the room in Asia.
All right. Thank you, Christian, so very much. And you know what? Sit tight, because we do have a little bit of diplomacy that's coming up. I'm sure you've heard of the first foreign presidential visit, state visit now with France. And so the French President Macron and his wife have arrived at Joint Base Andrews. We knew that this was coming up this hour. They are pretty much right on schedule at this point. His arrival here will mark later on having dinner with President Trump and the First Lady Melania Trump tonight ahead of their bilateral meeting tomorrow. But this is kind of the pomp and circumstance that we had expected. The president will not be, and obviously you don't see him there on the tarmac, will not be present for this. There will be a more formal welcoming of President Macron and his wife tomorrow. And now we're getting, and since you're still here, I can talk to you about this. Now we're getting some details about what that might look like tomorrow as well. So here we watch Joint Base Andrews. I want to go now, if we can, and bring in Brett Baer, our host of Special Report, who's also along. So I've got Christian Whiten and Brett Baer, but Brett, I want to get your thoughts on this too. So the president obviously not on the tarmac as we wait for French President Emmanuel Macron to come down the stairs, but we know what's coming up with this first visit like this.
It's a big deal, and they've established a relationship that is pretty strong. President Trump and President Macron, you heard him in the interview with Chris Wallace from Paris on Fox News Sunday, talk about that relationship and how they are trying to get to mutual agreement on a number of big issues. The fact that they're rolling out the red carpet here in Washington for the French president is significant. He has a lot of weight in Europe and may be the leader that this White House thinks is the future of leadership in Europe. Later on, President Trump will meet with the German Chancellor Angela Merkel. She's not receiving as big of a rollout. Tonight, the president and the First Lady welcome the French president and his wife to Mount Vernon for a dinner there, and then tomorrow the official state dinner at the White House, which, as you know, is a big formal affair.
Yeah, we just got word a little while ago of what that tomorrow morning reception will look like. It will have 500 members of our military and members on members on Capitol Hill as well, cabinet members. And so that will be more of the pomp and circumstance with the president and first lady there for all of that. This is, as you say, is our nation welcoming, and we've just lost the picture, which I knew was coming up. And so as we get it live coming back, we'll put it up there. But for this dinner tonight, you mentioned Mount Vernon. This is the person that the president has, Brett, perhaps the best relationship right now out of those European leaders that you were mentioning. It's been pretty chilly with Theresa May in Britain, and it's been pretty chilly with Angela Merkel in Germany. But with Emmanuel Macron, even though they are not politically yoked necessarily, they do share phone calls. And with our recent hitting of Syria after chem weapons, we were yoked militarily.
That's right. And the president reacts and recalls fondly his trip to Paris. This dinner tonight at Mount Vernon is a reciprocal kind of invite to when he was invited with the First Lady to Jules Verne restaurant in the Eiffel Tower in Paris the night before a big formal state dinner there. Obviously, you'll remember the big parade that the president attended in Paris. That will be similar to a parade that's in the works now here in Washington. So I think that there are a lot of similarities that these two men talk all the time, and they're trying to find big answers to big problems. Now, on the other side, French President Macron really wants the U.S. to stay in the Iran deal, as do many European leaders. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges on this trip, is to get that emphasized from their point of view.
Well, and what's interesting, too, Macron and Merkel have agreed they don't like the tariffs, and that's something that they both this week plan to discuss with this president. But the discussion always goes a little differently when you have a better relationship with someone, I would imagine. Will the president actually listen to the French president on tariffs and economies around the world and how they affect Americans and the French people? It will be interesting to see.
Yeah, I mean, the exclusions have gone out one after another of different countries being excluded from the various tariffs. Really, the tariffs are pointed towards China ultimately, and that is where they're pointing the tariff gun, if you will.
All right. Brett Baer, we will see you at 6 p.m. Eastern. By the way, we were talking about you on Outnumbered because you are interviewing James Comey coming up on April 26th. And so when that conversation came up, we all said, we have questions we want to send to Brett. And I try to remind people that you're open to that sort of thing.
Of course, bring them. Email me or tweet me or Facebook. I heard Kennedy called me a news miner.
She did.
Spelunking for facts. I like that.
You've got that light on. You're going through the you're spelunking. You're all ready to go. We'll be watching, and as we think of things, we'll email you with that invite. Thank you very much.
Sounds good.
Good to see you. As the news breaks, the French president on the ground now. And moving on, we're waiting now to hear from the White House ahead of that Senate Foreign Relations Committee vote on President Trump's Secretary of State nominee Mike Pompeo. A Democrat is on board with that, by the way. Joe Manchin of West Virginia says he will vote for Mike Pompeo's confirmation as Secretary of State. That tips the number into the favor of getting this done, even if Rand Paul says no. More on that as the news is breaking today. And House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes is raising new concerns about the information used to launch the Russia investigation. But the top Democrat on the committee, Adam Schiff, says this is just another attempt to discredit the probe into alleged Trump-Russia collusion. Who's right about this? Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton joins me right after the commercial break. Stay close.
We're trying to figure out how it is that this information about Mr. Papadopoulos, of all people, who was supposedly meeting with some folks in London, how that made it over across into the FBI's hands.
The French President Emmanuel Macron has arrived at Joint Base Andrews, and he will be going to meet, he and his wife, to meet our president and first lady. They'll take a little bit of a break, and then they'll meet again on Marine One later this afternoon and head to Mount Vernon, where they will dine. And the first meeting between our president and the French president on this particular trip will happen this evening. So we are watching to see if we catch him deplaning at this point, deboarding with his wife. I can tell you a couple of things have changed in the last little while that are kind of big news. So tomorrow morning on the South Lawn will be the big presidential welcoming, and we have learned that 500 members of our military will be there for what they call a review of the troops from the 5 branches of military, and you'll also see cabinet secretaries, members of Congress. It is a traditional welcoming with pomp and circumstance, but in the meantime, our country, you see the 2 flags welcoming theirs with President Macron and the First Lady of France coming down those steps. As it happens, we'll go back to it live. And also this Fox News alert, House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes now says electronic communication documents from the Justice Department and the FBI prove, quote, no official intelligence was used to launch the investigation into potential collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. Here he is yesterday on Sunday Morning Futures.
A counterintelligence investigation uses the tools of our intelligence services that are not supposed to be used on American citizens. So we've long wanted to know, well, what intelligence did you have that actually led to this investigation? So what we found now, after the investigators have reviewed it, is that, in fact, there was no intelligence.
All right, and just as we had gone to that, this was happening live, and we want to take you back out now to Joint Base Andrews, where the French president and his wife have arrived in the United States. They are being greeted without the president on the tarmac because the president and the first lady will wait and greet them as they stay at Blair House across the street from the White House. I'm giving you kind of the tick-tock and the big moments to watch for today. So they have landed. They're in the country. They're off the plane, obviously. The Macrons will head to the Blair House across from the White House for some downtime, we are told. And then at about 5 p.m. or so this evening, the Macrons will motorcade across to the White House, meet with President Trump and our First Lady for an official greeting there in the West Wing, outside the West Wing door, and then they will board Marine One and head to Mount Vernon, where they are expected to have dinner. And so this begins their 3-day visit. And of course, this is huge news because this is the president of France who says he's so much like President Trump. And it's interesting, he calls them both people who were not expected to win the elections that they won in their countries. He calls himself, along with President Trump, a couple of mavericks, and they reportedly talk pretty regularly. And of course, they have been talking recently as we moved in militarily with the coalition against Syria after the use of chemical weapons on citizens there. And so that was one point with regard to security around the world where Macron and our President Trump were yoked politically. However, it might pretty much end there. This president you see center screen from France does not appreciate the tariffs that President Trump is trying to put into place. He is very different on how he wants to move forward with deals like with Iran and North Korea. So those are some of the things that are no doubt going to come up as he is on the ground with the president today. So we are watching this as he is greeted. He and his wife are greeted here. And then just looking down on what they'll be doing today. Again, around 5 p.m., they will motorcade across the street to the White House, meet with our president and first lady, and then head for dinner. They'll head to Mount Vernon. And then on Wednesday, interestingly enough, he will greet a joint session of Congress as well. So there will be the traditional photo op outside the doorway of Mount Vernon tonight. And we may, you know, our president every now and then will have a few words. So we'll be watching for that. I'm giving you kind of the news points to watch for today because you'll see our network, Fox News Channel, dip in and out of this and give you a taste of what's happening as the First Lady and President Trump welcome the Macrons. After dinner, the first couples will depart Mount Vernon via Marine One again, and they'll be back on the White House South Lawn. And then tomorrow morning, that big event I was telling you about that now includes, and we learned about this just in the last hour or so, some 500 members of the United States Armed Forces from all 5 military branches on the South Lawn for a traditional review of the troops. The guests that have been invited are in that ceremony are cabinet secretaries, members of Congress, military families, and students from the Maya Angelou French Immersion School in Temple Hills, Maryland. But for right now, the Macrons headed out to Blair House across the street from the White House. Let's watch and listen for just a moment. So we have just listened to the national anthems of both countries there. You see, they've just pulled out now so you can see both flags there as the French President Emmanuel Macron and his wife Brigitte have arrived. And now they will be headed toward the White House. They'll get a little bit of downtime after that flight and then meet with President Trump and our First Lady Melania Trump. So an official greeting as they are in country. And this first official state visit from a foreign country while President Trump has been president. Let's listen to President Macron for just a moment.
Let me first say a few words in English, and I will switch in French. We're very, very happy and honored to be here with my wife Brigitte at the invitation of President Trump and Melania. This state visit is very important for our people and very important for us. We will have the opportunity of several discussions with President Trump this evening at Mount Vernon, tomorrow at the White House. I will deliver a speech at your Congress on Wednesday. And during the state visit, we will have the opportunity to discuss a lot of bilateral issues and to discuss about our security, about trade, and a lot of multilateral issues very important for our countries and beyond our two countries. This is a great honor, and I think a very important state visit given the moment of our current environment. Je vais maintenant dire quelques mots en français pour redire combien cette visite est importante à nos yeux et combien je suis honoré avec mon épouse de répondre à l'invitation du président Trump et de son épouse.
So we are watching Emmanuel Macron, the French president, first a few words thanking the President Trump and the First Lady Melania Trump for hosting them on this first state visit. And then a little bit maybe talking about what's coming up. And now he, of course, is addressing those in his home language. This is a big day. This is a day in which a man who might not have agreed much with our current president has talked about forging a friendship, has talked about what it looks like ahead for our countries to work together on things. And he does not agree on some of the tariffs that this president has called for. And there are other things that he says he does not agree on, but that he enjoys what he calls a friendship with President Trump. There is a bit more of a chilly relationship with some other leaders in Europe, as you might know. The president was very strong and very straightforward in his words more than a year ago when he said NATO members need to pay their own share, their fair share. And you remember, things got a little chippy there with some of the European leaders. There have been other places where we have seen maybe a little bit of political chilliness. Later this week, we have the German Chancellor Angela Merkel, also the British Prime Minister Theresa May. Those are two in Europe that this president has enjoyed a lot of candor with, but reportedly not the type of warm friendship that he has with the man you see to the left who's here. I'm joined now by California Republican and House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy. And you and I were set to talk about a whole host of things. And now the news breaks. Great to see you.
Well, great to have
person.
you on. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit, if we can, about what this man may say before Congress this week.
Well, he was going to do a joint session. I think you made a very good point earlier that a lot of people don't quite realize. The president has great relation with world leaders. They admire him, mainly because he's strong, honest, and direct. He was right about telling NATO that they need to put 2% in. That's what they need to do. America can't fund everything of where we're going. And I think that respect has drawn a better friendship with it. I think he's going to look at the ways that we could be a greater relationship. Remember, I have a special place in my heart for France because they were there when we were creating this country. Lafayette's portrait is in Congress with George Washington. Those are the two portraits there. So I think for trade, we could disagree on other items, but look what we just did with it when it came to Syria. The president brought France and the UK together, great allies, standing up for what was right and against the tyranny of poisoning children.
House Majority Leader, talk to me a little bit, if you can, about Iran. I guess my big question would be, you know, whatever we choose to do going forth has to do with our own foreign policy. But that is a sticking point, and that is something that this French president has said he wants to talk about.
I think it's important that we talk to him, because I would love France to be with us with whatever we do with Iran, because we're stronger standing up to Iran. That agreement was wrong from the start. Has it brought us more freedom in the world? It gave them a great deal amount of money. They're funding terrorism. They're still testing missiles as we talk about it. That agreement allows them to have a nuclear weapon at an end of a 10-year time period. That's unacceptable. And France should be concerned about that as well.
You know, it's interesting because when you talk about missiles testing, and we just learned from North Korea that they are willing to kind of knock that stuff off until they can have a sit down with our president. And of course, that will have to stand the test of time. We'll have to see if that's in fact what they do. But with that in our diplomatic arsenal, if you will, how does it change the conversation about Iran?
I think it changes a great deal, because what was the conversation 1 year ago with North Korea and it is today?
There wasn't one.
There wasn't. And I think the president, maybe others would sit back and say, oh, President Trump, you're being too harsh on him. They would not be at the table today if he didn't speak the truth. And what others respect him and show the success that he's having, I think bringing France in with us and others and going in, not alone, into Syria and standing up to Putin, I think this is making the world a safer place.
So in about the last hour and 15 minutes or so, we learned something that's really important with the process of getting our next Secretary of State. And that is that one of those Democrats that Republicans have been talking with, Joe Manchin of West Virginia, has confirmed that he will vote for the confirmation for Secretary of State of Mike Pompeo. Why is that critical?
That is critical because those who would not vote for Pompeo are just playing politics. And why would you play politics when here is Mike Pompeo graduating first in his class at West Point? I served with Mike. They voted for him to be the CIA director. Look at the job that he has done. He's excelled there. Look at what he's been able to do to help move us to get North Korea in a different place. And if you look at what the minority's been doing in the Senate, there's 1,200 positions that have to be confirmed with the new administration, and they're taking every minute to hold it up. If they can't keep at this pace, it'll take 11 years to confirm these people.
How much do you think it played a role in terms of getting at least one Democrat? I mean, you haven't had the vote yet. Maybe you'll get more. We don't know. To have Mike Pompeo actually address the issue that he wants to hire some people.
He needs it. Here we are with the world being so challenging that we've got North Korea in a place that every president before them wanted to get them in this situation. Having somebody at the Secretary of State is very, very important. That's a key position, especially with all of our allies. And to play political games at this time, this is the moment to say, I don't care what Schumer or Nancy Pelosi says, I'm going to put the country first.
You know what's interesting, Congressman? We know the history of Mike Pompeo. Per the Democrats, they say he's more hawk. He's too hawkish, some of them. But the pushback on that was his recent diplomatic visit with Kim Jong-un. Can you talk to me about the timing of that?
I think that was key. And he was able to do it without the world knowing. The outcome from those meetings are pretty good, because listen to what Kim Jong-un is saying today about testing of nuclear weapons. And from one standpoint, it was a hawkish Ronald Reagan that brought down the Berlin Wall. It was a hawkish Richard Nixon that opened up China. You know what? Because they understand what's going forward, and I think the respect on the other end of what to make a difference. Because we've tried every other angle. Remember what President Obama, he did a restart with Russia. Well, how well did that play for us? Russia is now back in the Middle East. They've have worse relationships with it they had in the past. You look at North Korea, all the different elements of wanting to go there. Obama said that he was going to get the chemical weapons out of Syria, and he trusts Russia. Now people have been killed from those chemical weapons. This is a real difference, where a straightforward approach of what America wants and what America expects, I think people have a better negotiation skills. And this is a man who went to West Point and served in the Army and graduated first in his class. And he served on the Intel
Democrats liked him the first time around for CIA director.
Yeah, why would you not like him now?
Well, the jobs are different. I mean, the jobs are obviously different. I want to, first of all, let's talk a little bit about what's happening on the left side of the screen here, since I have you here for both these breaking news stories. So we're expecting now to hear from the White House. Let's talk again about North Korea and the president telling North Korea now what has to happen in order for them to sit down. Did you ever think in your lifetime you would hear the word, I want you to dismantle your nuke systems?
I didn't think it was possible.
Do you think
by the direction? I do think it's possible. Remember, I think this is really at the point where Ronald Reagan was in his second term, sitting across from Gorbachev in Iceland. He was negotiating for a nuclear reduction. He was getting most of what he wanted. And then Gorbachev asked that we end the SDI program. Reagan said no. He actually said, I'll share it with you so the world could be safe. They declined. Reagan had a dilemma. Should he get up and walk away or stay? But he realized if there's no freedom, there's no ability for peace. He got up and walked away, and had he not, the Berlin Wall would not have collapsed and the Soviet Union would collapse. This is really what President Trump is saying. He wants to negotiate with you, but he's not going to be soft about it. He has his demands, he's upfront about it, and this is what he expects. And if you want to do that, we can have a relationship. But it's still like Ronald Reagan, trust but verify.
Real quick, last question on that, and I want to move on to the midterm elections. What happens if the president, as he has said, and you know he will do this, you know what? If it's not going to work, he's going to walk away from whatever the deal is.
I think the president bringing that out now really makes...
Does it concern you at all?
No, because it makes me feel a greater trust in this. Because this has happened before where presidents have gone in to Kim's father and made negotiations, and there were promises, and they got...
Madeleine Albright was there for 6 hours talking to them.
Yeah. I think they only understand and respect one thing, strength.
Things are different in our history from when she was there, for certain. You've had decades longer now of that patience that you say that we were...
I don't think we have the time for patience. From what they have been testing and how close to where they are, it's critical that we even got him at the table right now. I give this president a lot of credit. Where others would criticize him for what he was doing, I think it needed a different style to get a person.
You know what's interesting about what you say, too, and Mike Pompeo, he was the person who gave us that intelligence about potentially how close they might be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To have somebody going in Secretary of State that's been through West Point, served in Congress in the Intel Committee, been head of the CIA, that is a skill set that's unique for a special time and place of where we are in America today, and the relationship he has with this administration and members across the aisle. That's why I think it's a no-brainer. If a Democrat is saying no, they're playing politics.
All right. I'm so glad you're here. We'll talk midterms next time.
Thank you, Harris.
Majority Leader McCarthy, thank you. Now let's go to the White House press briefing. That is Sarah Sanders, the press secretary. Let's watch.
Trump administration. This visit will celebrate the long and enduring friendship between France and the U.S. Discussions will include economic, diplomatic, and global issues. The First Lady has taken an active role in every detail and planning of the visit, including the state dinner, which will be held tomorrow evening, and we're looking forward to a very successful state visit. As you all saw, we now have 3 Democrat senators who have announced they will vote to confirm Mike Pompeo, President Trump's highly qualified nominee for Secretary of State. However, a majority of Democrats continue their pointless obstruction to score cheap political points with their base as a willful attempt to undermine American diplomacy. Regardless, the president is looking forward to Mike Pompeo's confirmation so he can continue doing an incredible job on behalf of the American people. I also want to commend the heroic actions of James Shaw Jr. early Sunday morning at a Waffle House in Tennessee. Mr. Shaw saved lives when he wrestled a gun from an active shooter who had opened fire. The president offers his condolences to the victims and their families. He is monitoring the ongoing situation, and the White House is in regular contact with state and local officials. Finally, I want to congratulate the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge on the birth of their 3rd child, a baby boy. And from one mother to another, I know the reality of being outnumbered can be very scary, but I know she and Prince William will continue to be amazing parents. So congratulations to them, and with that, I'll take your questions. Jonathan.
Sarah, on North Korea, is the president willing to accept anything short of complete denuclearization before lifting any sanctions?
Certainly the goal is denuclearization of the peninsula, and we're going to continue the maximum pressure campaign that has been ongoing to North Korea until we see concrete actions taken towards complete and total denuclearization.
But does that mean no sanctions lifted until that's achieved, or are you willing to go incrementally?
Certainly no sanctions lifted until we see concrete actions taken by North Korea to denuclearize.
The president said in his tweet that they had agreed to denuclearize. Where did they do that? Have they already agreed to do that?
Certainly in a number of the conversations, including the comments I'd refer you back to, also South Korean President Moon, who has said that North Korea has expressed a will for complete denuclearization. And certainly that's the focus of any conversation and negotiation that the United States will have with North Korea. Steve?
Sarah, to what extent will the Iran nuclear deal come up in the conversation between the president and President Macron? And what does President Trump want to hear from Macron on this thing?
Look, I'm not going to get ahead of any conversations that we expect to take place over the next couple of days. As you know, they just landed a few minutes ago and haven't even arrived here at the White House. I'm not going to presume what those conversations will look like. We certainly expect that that will be part of the conversation, and we'll keep you posted if we have any specific details to put out about that.
Is the president still leaning toward decertifying the deal when it comes up again on May 12th?
I don't have any announcements on that front, but the president has been extremely clear that he thinks it's a bad deal. That certainly has not changed. Jim?
I wanted to ask you a question, sort of following up on what you were asked this morning about Michael Cohen. It was noticed by some that you didn't close the door one way or the other on the president pardoning Michael Cohen. What is your what's your read on that right now?
It's hard to close the door on something that hasn't taken place. I don't like to discuss or comment on hypothetical situations that may or may not ever happen. I would refer you to personal attorneys to comment on anything specific regarding that case, but we don't have anything at this point.
Can I just ask you about a tweet that the president put out last week? He tweeted a lot over the weekend, but last week he said he was talking about sanctuary cities in California and saying there's a revolution going on in California. So many sanctuary areas want out of this ridiculous crime-infested and breeding concept. We haven't had a chance to ask you about that tweet. When he used the word breeding, was he making a derogatory term about Latinos in California, that they breed a lot or that they're prone to breeding?
No, he's talking about the problem itself growing and getting bigger.
What does that mean?
Sorry, I've answered a couple. Justin, go ahead.
I also wanted to follow up on a couple of the president's tweets. The first was earlier this morning. I'm wondering if you could explain the president's tweet that he had ordered DHS not to allow large caravans of individuals into the country. So if you can say both what specifically he ordered DHS to do and what that would mean for individuals claiming refugee status within the United States.
Like the president continues to monitor the ongoing situation. A sovereign nation that cannot defend its borders will no longer be a sovereign nation. The Trump administration is committed to enforcing our immigration laws, whether people are part of the caravan or not. If you enter the United States illegally, let me be clear, you've broken the law, and we will enforce the law through prosecution of illegal borders. While we are committed to doing everything we can on the border to secure our nation, we need Congress to do their job as well and to pass legislation to close the legal loopholes and prevent us from securing our borders and protecting Americans.
The other tweet that the president did over the weekend, he said that he didn't see Michael Cohen flipping to get out of trouble with the government. I guess that prompts two questions. The first is what the president believes his personal attorney might have done to get him in trouble with the government, and secondly, what the president's done that he is worried Michael Cohen could flip about.
The president's been clear that he hasn't done anything wrong. I think we've stated that about 1,000 times. Beyond that, I don't have anything to add beyond the president's tweet. Matthew?
Thanks, Sarah. There have been a number of documented cases in the press recently of EPA Administrator Pruitt at least appearing to be dishonest about requesting raises for aides, about his relationship with a lobbyist who had business before the EPA, to name two. Is the White House concerned at all about this pattern, and is there concern about him testifying before Congress on Thursday as scheduled, where these issues are probably going to come up?
We're continuing to review a number of the reports that you mentioned, and we'll let you know if we have any changes on that front. Ashley?
Sarah, President Macron is hoping that a proposed side deal between U.S. and European powers could strengthen the Iran deal enough that President Trump would feel comfortable staying in it. So is that sort of a fool's errand? And the president has said it's a bad deal. Does he believe there's anything that could be done to fix it in a way he'd be comfortable with?
Again, I'm not going to get ahead of any potential conversations that are going to take place over the next couple of days. But as the administration has policy announcements, we'll be sure to share them with you. Mara.
Thank you, Sarah. Just to go back to Jonathan's question about North Korea, the president tweeted pretty flatly they have agreed to denuclearization. And then you're saying that they're just agreed to talk about it. What is the president's definition of complete denuclearization?
Again, I'm not going to negotiate with you guys. I'm going to leave that to the president and Kim Jong-un to walk through what some of those details would look like when that meeting takes place. But I can be very clear that we expect it not to just be mentioned in words, but there have to be concrete actions that take place towards total denuclearization of the peninsula.
Does that mean removing all nukes, our nukes?
Again, I'm not going to get into the negotiations of what will take place and what the agreement will look like, but there have to be concrete actions that stop the denuclearization of the peninsula.
Sarah, President Macron appears to have a very robust agenda coming to Washington. He wants to change the president's mind on a lot of different things, on the Iran nuclear deal, on keeping U.S. troops in Syria, on tariffs, and maybe even on the Paris Climate Accord. Does he have an open mind? Is it possible that he will change his mind after President Macron gets through with him?
I think that I feel very confident that we have the best negotiator at the table. Look, you have two leaders that have an incredibly good. Hold on, let me finish. Let me finish. That's not what I said. I said that we have a great negotiator at the table. I certainly was not commenting on President Macron's abilities, simply stating the obvious that we have an incredibly good negotiator at the table for the United States. But what you do have are two leaders who have a great deal of respect for one another, who have a great friendship, certainly both have a great deal of interest in doing what is best for their country, but being able to have very open and candid conversations because of the relationship, not only that the leaders have built, but that has existed between the two countries long before either of these individuals arrived on the scene. And we're going to continue that relationship, but I think we can expect this to be a very productive and very positive state visit for both countries.
I said for both countries.
Again, I'm not going to get ahead of conversations that are going to take place, but as we have any policy announcements, I'm sure you guys will be the first to know. Again, the president wants to make good deals for this country, and if he feels like he can make a good deal that benefits this country, he's certainly going to engage in those conversations. Peter.
Sarah, why should North Korea believe that the U.S. is an honest broker when the president has said publicly that he would like to get out of the deal the U.S. and others made with Iran?
Look, the president's been clear from day one that he thinks that's a bad deal. I don't think any deal that he would sign and agree to he would consider a bad deal. The president wants to do what is in the best interest. The president wants to do what is in the best interest of our country and even in the world, and particularly having North Korea and the Korean Peninsula free of nuclear weapons, I think is a good thing for everybody, and I think even you would be hard-pressed to find something different. Steve?
What you said
Sorry, Peter. Tight time. I'm going to keep moving.
I think we should.
Yeah, Sarah, I just want to follow up on that about North Korea. I'm wondering what gives you any optimism that the North Koreans are really looking to denuclearize because of the statements that they're making. Everybody seems to be jumping on the very positive aspects of the statements, but they're also saying over the weekend that their completion of the nuclear arsenal, which they call their powerful treasured sword, firmly guarantees forever the country's security and well-being. That doesn't sound like any wiggle room on denuclearization.
Certainly, we're not going to make mistakes from previous administrations, and we're not going to take the North Koreans simply at their word. Like I said before, and we've said many times before, the maximum pressure campaign is going to continue until we see concrete actions taken by, look, we're not naive in this process. We've seen some steps in the right direction, but we have a long way to go. We also have seen a major change in what has taken place in the past by having our allies and partners in the region step up and do much more than they have in the past. China has taken a more active role in putting pressure on North Korea. They can certainly do more. We hope they will and will continue working with us. And that's all at the direction and because of the relationship that the president has built with President Xi of China.
I have two quick questions. The first one is that the New York Times and others report that federal prosecutors have recommended charges against the New York police officer involved in Eric Garner's death. But the Justice Department has expressed some strong reservations. Where do things stand with the case of Eric Garner? And when does the Justice Department, when are they going to make a decision about the police officer and whether or not they're going to charge him?
I don't have an administration update on that front, but would refer you to the Department of Justice to get further details, and I'll work on getting an update for you and let you know.
The question I have is the president tweeted.
Sure. Usually when we let one, it's kind of, it's not exactly a secret, but yeah, I'd be happy to share that with everybody.
The second question is the president tweeted, James Comey illegally classified documents to press illegally leaked documents to press to generate a special counsel. Therefore, the special counsel was established based on an illegal act. Really, does everyone know what that means? What does the president think that means? And is he indicating that the special counsel should be fired because of the way that it was begun?
As we've said many times before, we have no intention of firing the special counsel. We've been beyond cooperative with them. We're continuing to cooperate with them, turned over nearly over 1 million pages and documents to the special counsel and have been cooperative. Exactly what the president's been saying all along, that this was a false premise that this entire thing started on. We continue to repeat that we think that the idea that the Trump campaign was involved in any collusion with Russia is a total witch hunt. Our position on that has been very clear since the beginning of this process, and the president's echoing exactly what that position is. John?
Thanks a lot, Sarah. Over the weekend, a fourth House Republican called for EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt to step down. He said he's the wrong fit for the EPA. What's your reaction to that?
Again, we're reviewing some of those allegations. However, Administrator Pruitt has done a good job of implementing the president's policies, particularly on deregulation, making the United States less energy dependent and becoming more energy independent. Those are good things. However, the other things certainly are something that we're monitoring and looking at, and I'll keep you posted. Blake?
Last week, Andrew Wheeler was confirmed by the Senate. He is Scott Pruitt's deputy at the EPA. Couldn't he easily implement all of the president's agenda if Scott Pruitt stepped aside? He wouldn't have a dark cloud hanging over the agency. What's your view on that idea?
We're very excited that the Democrats have finally allowed another one of our nominees to go through. We hope that they'll allow some of the other several hundred that sit waiting to be confirmed, very highly qualified individuals. We hope that they'll continue to follow in the footsteps of that and get a lot more people within this administration working. Blake?
Thank you, Sarah. On the Iran nuclear deal, President Macron said, don't leave as if there's not a better option. And then the Iranian foreign minister tweeted today, quote, President Macron is correct in saying there's no plan B. It's either all or nothing. So my question to you is, does the White House believe that there is actually a realistic plan B out there?
We certainly think that there should be a better deal, one that actually is positive, that works, and we don't really typically look to the leadership in Iran to determine what our foreign policy is. John?
And then later today on Mike Pompeo.
Sorry, I'm going to keep moving just because we're running out of time. John?
Thank you, Sarah. You may not be willing to be specific about the matters that President Trump and President Macron will negotiate on, but the French finance minister, Bruno Le Maire, was very specific at the World Bank and IMF spring meeting. He said on Friday that France would insist on, and I quote, a full and permanent exemption, end of quote, of any trade tariffs the United States might want to impose on France. He went on to say that if they are going to be a partner in dealing with China and other countries, they cannot have what he called a sword of Damocles hanging over them. That's pretty strong language. Is trade and a
We can at
permanent
least agree on
exemption?
that.
Yeah. Is it on the table as Minister Lemaire wishes?
Again, we certainly expect this to come up in conversations over the next 2 days. When we have any policy announcements, we will absolutely let you know. Kevin.
Thank you, Sarah. Two quick ones. One on Syria. Is it fair to say the president agrees with the French president that a precipitous or too quick removal of America's presence from Syria would be a danger or damaging to the Syrian people? And if there is agreement there, is there a possibility that the two will come to some sort of a formal announcement during his time here? And a follow on Mike Pompeo, what would be the #1 issue that the president would like him to tackle, assuming that, as expected, he is approved today?
First, I'll talk about the Syria question. Again, certainly something that will come up. The president is committed to defeating ISIS. That is our primary goal and function of being there. We want to see that happen. The president also wants to see the partners in the region step up and do more, both militarily and financially. And that's going to be something that I can imagine will be raised, and we'll keep you posted on that front. When it comes to Director Pompeo, it is absolutely outrageous that he would not move through quickly. He's extremely qualified for the position. The Washington Post, a number of other outlets that certainly aren't typically the biggest advocates of this president, have said confirm him already. I think you have to look back at history, specifically to Secretary of State confirmations and bipartisan votes. John Kerry was confirmed 94-3. Hillary Clinton was confirmed 94-2. Condoleezza Rice was confirmed 85-13. Colin Powell was confirmed unanimously by voice vote. I think that if you even look at some of the questioning that's been brought up by the Senate, no one doubts Pompeo's qualifications and his ability to do the job. So I think that not only is the White House, but all of America should be calling on the Senate to actually do their job, do what they are required and expected to do, and that is to help government function and to help on the safety and the security of our country. This is an incredibly important position, and that plays a big role in that, and they should certainly support Mike Pompeo and get that done today. And I think, frankly, for particular members of Congress, that it's very hard for them to justify voting in favor of someone like John Kerry and not following suit and voting in favor of Mike Pompeo. Right here.
Just on Pompeo, does the president consider Republicans who oppose Pompeo's nomination to be obstructionist? And separately, what does it say to the rest of the world if Pompeo can't get a favorable recommendation out of the Senate Foreign Relations?
Certainly don't think that those members are being helpful. And I think what it says to the world is what we've been saying for a long time, is the Senate's got some real problems, and they need to figure out how to actually show up and do their job a little bit better. Mike.
A couple, one on NAFTA and Iran. On NAFTA, has the administration decided whether to bring a renegotiated deal back to Congress? Is there a chance that those changes won't need congressional approval? And just on Iran, that deal has been being looked at by a team that was appointed by...
Let me address NAFTA first. On NAFTA, those conversations and negotiations are ongoing. I don't have any updates for you on that front beyond what we've already said.
The president's Iran team was mostly put in place by McMaster and Tillerson. Does the president still have confidence in that team? Has he been briefed on their developments lately? And does he and John Bolton support where they're at right now?
Absolutely. The president's got a great deal of confidence in a number of members across the board that remain part of his team, his national security team. Great group of people, and the president's been working very closely with them, and most of those individuals have been on